Welcome back and good evening if you've just joined us. Africa News Network on Channel 405 with myself, Cindy Mabi, and Clive from Matibella Smith. The top story this hour, the showdown between IPID and SAPS leadership continued in Parliament today.
Acting National Police Commissioner Kgomotso Phahlane questioned the involvement of South African, or rather the private investigator Paul O'Sullivan in the investigation. Phahlane also went all out, saying that the IPID is not independent and has been turned into a propaganda machine.
The head of IPID, Robert McBride, testified that O'Sullivan's contribution was minuscule, saying that out of 67 statements on Phahlane's investigation, the private investigator only assisted with 3.
General Phahlane is still acting in the position. So therefore, it is our view that as an acting, we can still have another person acting whilst this matter is investigated without interference.
Who is Paul O'Sullivan? Paul O'Sullivan is a South African citizen with dual or maybe more citizenships. Paul O'Sullivan has provided information on a number of occasions to IPID. We agree with some things he does, we don't agree with others. We don't agree with his attitude, we do things differently, but he did provide information to us. And yes, he did help with some of the statements. Of the 67 statements on the Phahlane investigation, 3 came to IPID with a complaint during the period when we were suspended, and 3 he assisted in drafting, out of 67, so a total of 6. So Paul O'Sullivan's assistance to the investigation has been minuscule.
IPID alleges that Commissioner Phahlane interfered in the IPID probe and should be suspended, to which Phahlane says the IPID is no longer independent and serving the interest of Paul O'Sullivan.
He also argued that Paul O'Sullivan and his assistant were caught and charged for impersonating an IPID investigator, and to IPID's charge that Phahlane was informed of the investigation against him, the acting police commissioner dared IPID to produce proof of this. The IPID alleged death threats against the investigating officer and complainant soon after the probe began, and Phahlane says that he tried his best to comply with the alleged illegal investigation.
IPID says that the Phahlane and Major General Ntebo Mbolula intended IPID investigators looking into cases against the acting top cop. In turn, Phahlane revealed details of email threats by O'Sullivan warning him of bloodshed if his bidding is not done.
Meanwhile, IPID told MPs that the acting National Commissioner's conduct is criminal and undermines Parliament. Phahlane accused the IPID of running a well-orchestrated propaganda machine and running to media instead.
IPID as an independent body doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It is not functioning. In actual fact, Chair, under the current circumstances, it may be safe to call it OPID, O'Sullivan's Police Investigative Directorate. They have been captured for far too long. We will demonstrate that in our presentation. What is it that we are referring to? And we cannot allow the state institutions to be utilized to serve people's personal agendas. Under no circumstances will I come here before Parliament to come and lie. If there is an element of integrity in IPID, they must withdraw that to say that Phahlane was informed. And the fact that they here in Parliament have said that I have lied, that I was informed. I'm on record, Honorable Chair, to say that the first time that I knew about these allegations was when a Mr. Ngabinde called me and said he wants to see me.
Members of Parliament questioned private investigator Paul O'Sullivan's involvement in IPID's investigations and his relationship with Robert McBride. And joining us in studio is Mosiri Tsiane. He's from the South African Liberty Foundation, the chairperson there, and with Mosiri Attorneys. And we have Nwara Okonkwa, a legal expert. The lines are open to you at home on 011-542-2186. Gentlemen, good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. I mean, the security cluster is a very critical, I suppose, branch of government. And we've seen these consternations and fights between SAPS boss, IPID, NPA, etc. Do you think that there will be a resolution until, I suppose, depending on who's the last man standing, anytime soon, Mosiri?
Well, there has to be, for the security of our country, there's got to be a resolution to this. But this infighting that seems to be erupting, especially with the presence of a private individual by the name of O'Sullivan, a private investigator, and this raises other questions which were raised by the Minister of Intelligence that says that there's been an infiltration, or there is an infiltration by the Western countries into our governance and our state of affairs. Now, we cannot ignore that for some reason or the other, you've been having, particularly the presence of O'Sullivan at all times. These cases that are investigated, the police officers or any other person that is investigated, you would hear or you would see in the media being publicized right there and there in his involvement as such. But above all, I think for these cases becomes our test in times, so that in future we know how to deal with such appointments of these key critical personnel in our departments, particularly in this state. We've got to make sure that the contracts that are signed there, who's going to make sure that when there is a dispute, you don't necessarily have an opposition taking that contract or whoever running into court, that you give much power to the Minister of the Police in deciding, so that such dispute can be resolved as speedily as possible. Otherwise, we'll have a situation which is unbearable. We'll have a country that is just ungovernable. You know, it's easier, for argument's sake, that in the United States, you'd have the president who will come and say the FBI head must go. You know, just like that. And there's no way in which he can run to court and challenge that. You've got to have that situation in South Africa so that we don't have a recurrence of such. What has happened today is an insult to democracy in general, particularly when you have these two independent bodies that can go in a public arena and fight just like that and say, you don't have the right to investigate me, you don't have the right to question my investigation, I can investigate myself, and so forth. So in future, we've got to correct these impulses that seems to be, these contradictions that are happening. These are the people that we, and rather look into them for our security and our police officers, but at all times. You don't have a situation, you don't need to have a situation where you have a police commissioner at all times being followed with allegations of corruption and so forth. You've got, if there is such, then the minister must intervene in that regard and deal with the matter right there and there.
It's a very tough one because, you know, the minister is new, firstly, but this has been going on prior his time in any case. And we know that the previous minister had trouble, for example, with appointments in the current situation that we sit with right now, not just at IPID, but also in the SAPS. But let's talk about the person, or the elephant in the room, as it were. Mr. O'Sullivan, who was referred to as the OPID. Mr. Okonkwo, how dangerous is it for state intelligence, state police, to be involved with a private investigator on this level, where now it seems like they feel, the private individual feels far more powerful than the even acting police commissioner or even the head of IPID?
Well, basically, let's go back to the basics. IPID, prior to its setting up in 2011, which was an act which was instituted by Act 1 of 2011, that empowered them. What is the role of the IPID? Okay, then let's look at it from the function of interrelating relationship between them and the SAPS. These are similarity in what is going on now in the principle of separation of powers. Okay, now where we've seen the DA has taken the matter to the CONCORT. Okay, That's another discussion for another day. However, within this context of analysis, okay, IPID has every right to checkmate the transparency, the accountability of the SAPS. However, if the method of doing it is seemed not to be causing disrepute, to make a mockery or travesty of the function of what they are trying to do, then the National Assembly or the Acts of Parliament, which happened today in the Old Chamber, to resolve the thing that is going on between them, because they are the presidency set them up. Okay, what McBride is saying is that the current acting police commissioner is interfering with the procedure of accountability to refer transparency, which they are doing. Okay, now, Poulani, who is the acting police commissioner, is saying that this is dysfunctional. How do we reconcile the two forces working together to achieve a sound system of intelligence in the state? That's the melting point of discussion. Now, O'Sullivan for me is not an issue. We are making him an issue. Okay, SAPS and IPID can decide, let him go. They can use any other person. Okay, but for me, what fundamentally is bothering me on the whole subject matter is I can't understand where two respected authorities that are supposed to be championing, checkmating crime in the society should be emerging something that is so trivial. I mean, if you are saying, I am corrupt, summon me, show your proof, let the world know. Not making it in terms of personal vendetta, but rather make it an open, objective thing that is subjective. Mm-hmm. At that point, you get the melting point whereby you say, guys, get your house in order. And this man is just not the current minister of police. I don't want to be in his shoes right now because he has a lot to deal with. Okay, even though I believe he's setting the right records, the first thing was to get the head of Hawks suspended, which I feel is good because the court gave that decision. It has to be respected. The second thing, he has to deal with this crisis here, killing there, and then this again. Come on.
Let's invite Pop Crew spokesperson Richard Mamabolo. Thanks so much. Good evening to you. Just a view as a material stakeholder in this matter. Give us your sense in terms of what the members of Parliament were inquiring regarding what seems to be carte blanche that Paul O'Sullivan has and his demeanor in what the Commissioner Phahlane was saying, that he had threatened to be on him like a cheap suit. He will not let him let go until he has him. Do you think that these were essentially just threats that are made in the spur of the moment, or is there more to it?
Look, I think the first thing is that it can't be that 3 out of 67 statements made against the acting national commissioner can then be holistically linked to this issue around the foreign agencies interfering within our criminal cluster. I think that it's quite clear that as much as he did made a contribution of 3 inputs, it cannot then be overridden, or rather, the 67 statements cannot be overridden by just three of those. We are of the view that the process around the IP doing their work should not be interfered with, and of course, if there are interferences from whichever level, they should obviously be dismissed. You know, they should be condemned. We feel that if Mr. Phahlane claims to be innocent, as he says, why not let the investigation go through and prove him innocent if he is innocent? So we cannot therefore want to say that certain people, because this creates an assumption that certain people holding certain positions cannot be investigated on the basis that certain information come from certain individuals. We cannot allow that at all. So we are of the view that the allegations need to obviously be investigated. Let the IP do its duty and come up with a conclusion. Only on those bases can we then get to get to know the truth. It cannot be that out of all the investigations that have been reported to have been done about the acting national commissioner, that we look into only 3 statements that had been made by one individual and then conclude that the credibility thereof cannot go ahead. What the damage that this is doing to the police service is that it's eradicating the trust that the people have on us. But as well, within the SAPS itself, members are worried about these challenges that we are seeing now. You know, it cannot be correct that you have somebody who's leading you who is implicated in so many scandals. We feel that the only way to really go about this is to ensure that the acting national commissioner either steps down for a bit until the conclusion of this matter, or rather have measures to ensure that he does not interfere with the investigations as alleged.
Mamabolo, if you don't mind, just one question. We have a history with the South African police services. Unfortunately, it's not a good one. We know that we've had cries of corruption in the past, and we know for a fact that we've never had a long-standing permanent police commissioner. Does this not add to that cloud then, and it starts together now and it becomes grey, that this perhaps maybe also might mean that even our acting police commissioner might be found to be guilty, and that on its own, the fact that we don't have a good history with our commissioners, does that not then remove that integrity and trust that we should be having as civil society about the police and what service they provide us?
I think that the fact that we've got IPID is actually to ensure that they oversee the transparency of the SAPS, and that, of course, we believe will ensure that there is, rather we build trust within communities, which is one of the important aspects since moving from a police force to a police service, you know, in servicing the people of South Africa. Those are part of the challenges. I think if you have to deal with what police officers on the ground go through on a daily basis would be amongst others would be the fact that the relations between communities and police has not been good, and therefore it becomes difficult for police to do their work on the ground. So when you've got somebody who's got such allegations on their head, what impression does it give to society, you know, that we cannot trust the police because, I mean, they are corrupt at all levels, you know. Yeah. So we need that credibility. Hence, we are arguing that IPID, which is meant for that role specifically to ensure that there is transparency within the SAPS, should do its job.
Yeah, thank you very much, Musiri. It's a very tough one, and Mr. Okonkwo tried to explain in trying to make an example about the separation of powers. We know the role of IPID, we know the SAPS. We know that they have to be accountable at the end of the day, but we know the history, and unfortunately, it's not a bright one. It's not a clean history that we've had with the police commissioners. Are we going to get to a point where we have a long-standing, not acting, but a police commissioner appointed, and not only that we have IPID allowed to do its service and do its job within the SAPS, also trusting that they do it not on a personal vendetta basis, but they're doing it really out of integrity and trust?
Well, it's a hope that we all have. You know, with our young democracy, you can never ignore such interferences. But the elephant in the room being that history that you've indicated earlier on of interferences that you can have either from the commissioner of the police himself, or be that as it may, that you also have a particular history. You would remember that one particular stage, you had one deputy president who happens to be a wife of a former public prosecutor who had been to prosecute a specific individual. You can remember that there was that other interest that was there. Now, once you have that elephant in a room, once you've got somebody else whom, if I hate you personally, and yet I have an issue with you directly, and I'm appointed to investigate you, there can only be one outcome. There can just be one outcome. If I've got an issue with you from the onset, therefore, we've got to look into how do we deal with this other issues. That's what I'm saying. Our young democracy has got to find a mechanism where when those conflicts arises, we've got to look for a third person who's going to be more neutral. You can't say when the police commissioner raises an issue and say, you've got a personal vendetta against me, and we say, no, but you are an independent body, therefore let's put it aside. He will investigate you fair and square. No, an issue has been raised. We cannot put it aside and ignore. It's a factor. That is, it's a living factor that you have also went worse. You've appointed a private investigator who's got an issue with me, and let alone that issue with me, who's got an issue with the current state of this country, who's got a problem with the president of the country, who's got a problem with ANC in particular.
So you're saying that what the questions raised in Parliament regarding not only his citizenship, the fact that he's got access to highly sensitive and confidential documents, and also has been seen to be on raids with the police, or rather with IPID for that matter. Is his role, isn't it a little bit uncomfortable in his closeness to the cases, Mr. Okonkwo? Or you are saying that it is a prerogative of IPID to choose which investigator they want?
You see, these things could better be resolved from appointment. Okay. I'll give you an example. When you relate to FBI and when you relate to Scotland Yard, okay, these are secret services of intelligence of highly reputable and mostly developed economies. Okay, why did James Comey lose his job as FBI chief? Was because of his involvement in the election, because of was investigating. Now, let's bring it down to basics. Before the police commissioner should be appointed, before the head of the IPID should be appointed, those individuals should be seen to be above board. They should be seen that people have risen above the heterogeneous nature and are people that are highly objective, have an impeccable track record to be in such position. Therefore, when matters of such nature comes up, okay, they bring individuals that will give sound, objective conclusions. What do I mean by what I'm saying? I'll give you an example. Our late leader, even in death, is highly reverenced, is highly respected, Mandela. Why? Because if you look at him, he is an epitome of everything that is good. Okay, so he cannot be questioned. In fact, under his leadership, there was less corruption, if there was any. Everybody, in fact, I didn't even hear of anything like rioting by the parties. Things were seamless because of an individual exemplary work. Relate it down to an individual that everybody, all the parties okays to be there. This kind of thing would not be in existence. I mean, it doesn't make sense for the head, okay, and for the head of IPID and for SAPS to be at loggerheads. They should be together to find a common enemy, which is crime.
All right, Mr. Mamabolo, do you say what Commissioner Phahlane was saying, that IPID is captured essentially by Paul O'Sullivan, that this is baseless, or do you support his argument? Richard? All right, Masiri, maybe, Richard, you there? Let's just give that to Masiri. Do you think his statement is crying foul, as it were, and trying to be the victim, as opposed to it maybe perhaps being investigated, whether Paul O'Sullivan is overreaching in his role?
Well, if I'm investigated and I'm investigated by somebody who's got a specific interest, surely that investigation is not going to be fair on me. And I've got the right to raise an issue. Yes. And if I raise an issue, it should be taken seriously. It cannot be taken like, I'm not saying I should not be investigated. That should be very clear. I don't think he says I'm above approach. I'm above investigation. I'm a superior, all untouchable police commissioner. No. I don't think that's what he's indicating. He says, but the person that seems to be involved in my investigation seems to have a personal vendetta. And these are the reasons that I am raising. And herein, in this investigation, people are being referred as murderers, as corruptors, and so forth. But yet, that has not been proven beyond. I'm inclined to agree a little bit with my learned colleague over here and say that you've got to have a situation where you are really above everything else, that a police commissioner becomes a person that we look and uphold to and say, these are the epitome of what a police commissioner should be, and these are the ethics that is expected of them. But when we go and test whether they are right or whether they are corrupt and so forth, we've got to also have that very same institution has to have those high echelons. It has to have those high standards itself. It can't be, it never will be right that you have O'Sullivan playing a role in them and you expect that the results that investigation will come up will become unquestionable results. They themselves seems to be tainted from day one.
Yeah, Siri, that is very, very interesting, and I feel that you investigating me right now as we continue. Thank you very much to our guest. Okay, I've got something to hide.
You captured.
See, there we go. Anyway,
oh goodness,
that was our guest there talking to us about what happened at Parliament as the SAPS and the IPID were up at loggerheads trying to resolve matters there in Pali. But very, very difficult, I suppose, my sister.
Absolutely. We have to take a quick